We're back with Mary Engel, who's known as the management coach. And we're back to talk to her more about the difference between leaders and managers.
From a leadership perspective, being able to give an employee base, a workforce, the courage to stand up, speak up, say things. The research has been done. It's so incredibly valuable when leaders can do that. The problem is the leaders themselves don't have the courage to. The leaders themselves.
Exactly right. You're right. They talk a good game, but they don't play a good game,
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So and part of the reason why you kind of have to work with both, right? You need to give the leaders the opportunity to experience and understand those behaviors, those management behaviors that demonstrate that they trust and that they have courage and that they're going to let people try some things and communicate things that are difficult to hear. And then you got to work with the managers to be able to find the words and find the style that's going to communicate those things in a non-threatening way that helps their leaders feel safe around them. And that, I think, is a critical piece. I have to tell you, Gayle, some of the managers that I work with are working for very scared leaders. And one of the pieces of advice that I give them when they're communicating with their leader is that you have to help your leader feel safe with you. And sometimes that's kind of like you, the manager, have to be the parent in the conversation.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you mentioned technology before, and I think although technology it's helped in one way, because it makes things easier, it's not helped in another way because it's eliminated a lot of jobs so that people don't have the support staff they used to have. But it also allows leaders to text and email their managers at home. So what about this? I'm always getting notifications by text or email from my leader, or sometimes the people working for the managers get them from the managers, and they're almost like a 24/7 kind of thing. Where do you stand on that?
This is a fun one. So I think our natural inclination, when there are no ground rules or guidelines around technical communication, our natural inclination is to want to respond right away and to expect a response right away. And I think there's a couple of things that managers and leaders can do when it comes to using these communication methods. However, the trouble with these techniques I'm going to describe to you is that it requires courage and it requires discipline. And the discipline is simply a manager's job to stay resilient with the process. So number one, we all know through priority management that being distracted by dinging and flashing emails and text messages on an ongoing basis is the highway to ineffectiveness. And so there has to be a ground rule that says you are to turn off all notifications except for text messages. Strictly text messages from phone to phone. What this does is it allows a workforce to be dedicated to whatever they're focused on in the moment, whether they're in a meeting, focusing on a conversation, they're at their desk, focusing on a project, that there should only be interruptions at certain parts of the day where you can stop to check non-urgent messages. And all non-urgent messages can go through email, they can go through Slack chats or whatever other instant messaging feature you have internally, but that those notifications remain off and that you check them intermittently throughout the day. The exception is the text message or the phone call. And that is to say that urgent communications would go through text message or phone call, and that the expectation around response time on those things is a little bit more immediate. And so if I pick up the phone and call you, it is because it is something that's required immediately. It is a high priority for both you and for me, and therefore we need to get at it right away. Or a text message is similar in that vein. And so you find that when you do that, the communication becomes much more streamlined and much less debilitating for everybody in the workforce.
And what if I get some of these texts at 7 o'clock at night or on a Saturday afternoon?
I think today's workforce is much more accommodating to those things if you're sticking with the process, because most managers are measured now by the morale and engagement of their team. There is a balanced scorecard metric that says, are you retaining employees? Are they happy? Are they satisfied? Are they engaged? And so that limits leaders' ability to be texting and intruding on an employee's personal time. That said, many employees and managers will accommodate weekend and evening communications as long as it's not constant. And they will remain satisfied and fulfilled with their work if they're interrupted reasonably after hours and on weekends. And I think the other thing we're seeing with the workforce now, including those over 50 and those approaching 50, is that they're truly seeking out meaningful work. And because they're seeking out meaningful work that's more consistent with their values and the contribution they want to make as a human being, they are more inclined to express that contribution outside of the 9 to 5 hours. They're okay going above and beyond because they understand the meaning of their work and how it helps society. And I think that goes a long way. If you can tie the work to the person's values, it is motivating to them to be able to help on off hours.
So how did you get started in this work, Mary? I mean, did it come because you faced these things yourself, or did you just kind of morph into it, or how did it all start?
A little bit of both, I would say. I made a choice early in my career. My undergraduate is in music and math, and so I don't know what you do with that other than maybe become a teacher. I went into a business type of role, starting out as an administrator and then taking on more and more project work, and quickly realized I knew very little about business, and so decided to get an MBA. And I think there's only ever 3 reasons why you would get an MBA. One is because you want the letters and it makes you feel good. The other is because you don't know anything about business and you need to learn some very specific skills, particularly if you're going to be in an investment banking or consulting role where they really recruit out of business schools. But also if you're going to be in a management or leadership role and you don't have the skills. And number 3 is if you're going to go into academia and continue to pursue an academic career. So then you should get an MBA. So I did that purely because I didn't know anything and wanted to learn quickly. And from there, I started out in a job of management consulting. And in that job is where I started to learn about the practices and behaviors of managers. And from there, I experienced some challenges in my life in terms of relationships with men, hired a couple of life coaches, because it was that traumatic, and then decided from there that, life coaching is something that is essential for managers. And I didn't see anybody really doing a holistic, comprehensive job of it from the management perspective. And so I decided to launch a business around management coaching. And primarily, I kind of got thrust into it because the person I was working under was making my life difficult. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I one day just said, I don't accept this treatment from you anymore. I quit. And so I stayed on for 2 more weeks. I had my 5-year anniversary on my very last day of work. They took me out for lunch and they gave me my 5-year gold ring. And the next morning I woke up and created my website. At the time it was managementcoach.ca and now it's themanagementcoach.com. And I've been doing that for the last 7 years. So that was launched in 2010.
Wow. I have to laugh because I was in business at 21 and I didn't have a business course. Or a math course for that matter. I did have a music background. And of course I was, kind of in show business, and I was all about, the stage and acting and broadcasting. And I had my first business, I had a modeling school. So But I built it into 7 offices and 350 people. And but I never had a business course, and I still have never had a business course. But I learned, of course, on the job, because if you don't, you're in deep trouble. But it is interesting that today entrepreneurs, I think of entrepreneurs as leaders. I don't think of entrepreneurs as managers. I think they make lousy managers. I mean, they are the visionaries. They are the ones that create and make and do, but they're not great managers, you know. So um, if there was one thing that you would leave people with about leadership, you know, something practical that they could start doing today to make their team even dreamier, what would that be?
Well, if we're talking about leadership, um, leadership is about creating a compelling vision, compelling people towards it, and then providing them the resources to make it a reality. And so, from a leadership perspective, if you're going to provide the resources to make your vision a reality, then it's really important to hire the right people. Hire people who make that job easier, who know how to manage. Now, any leader can learn how to manage. Manage is a very simple discipline. It's a repetition of very specific steps over and over and over again. And I think that's the only reason why entrepreneurs fall short on it. Entrepreneurs are visionary, and they have a low attention span when it comes to discipline. So hire people with the discipline to execute your vision with predictable results, predictable, repeatable results. I think that would be the key piece of advice that I would give entrepreneurs specifically around leadership.
And you know, that brings to mind the fact that uh, I'm hired to do a particular task and I do it very well, but then that task goes away. It gets eliminated, either because of technology or because of market trends or whatever it happens to be. And now the skills that I had in one phase may not be appropriate for something else. And I think that is, I almost think of coal miners and steel workers, because when steel dried up, people didn't go out and get trained in new things. They expected, well, I'm a steel worker, I'll always be a steel worker, and that's what I do. And in reality, I mean, you had to be retrained in something brand new. So I think that really is a dichotomy in a lot of ways, because what I was hired to do may not be what I'm expected to do in the future. And I think that's tough.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's very important that people understand. It goes back to that conversation we had earlier about the job description.
Right.
Is
Exactly.
if you don't have the foresight to realize that every job that has a job description will become obsolete eventually, because it will outlive the expectations will outlive that job's purpose. And if you just simply set the job description aside and really think critically about how do you get ahead of the curve around eliminating your job, because your job, really, every manager's job, every employee's job, is to figure out how to make their current job, obsolete, and how to keep up with what the requirements will be of the organization moving
Mm-hmm.
forward, so that you really do remain in the critical elite few who are driving the results of the organization. I think that's really important. That said, I will tell you, anecdotally speaking, the people that I have worked with who have lost their jobs, 9 times out of 10, they lacked 100% commitment to what they were doing. There
Interesting.
was there was something in it that just did not resonate with them. They weren't willing, able, or ready to do the work with that job. And there was always, every time I asked them, there was like something in the back of their mind that said, I don't actually know that I want to be doing this. And 9 times out of 10, those people lost their job and then ended up in a job that they loved and paid them more and treated them better. And they are just in way better spirits, in a way better position in their new job. And so I think it's really important for people who are out of work to recognize, where was it that that job wasn't serving you, that you were hoping and wishing somewhere in the back of your mind that you wouldn't have to be there anymore. So to give yourself a little bit of relief and then go on to find that work that's really, truly going to fulfill you and make you happy.
So I would think, Mary, that you have to almost interview organizations who might want to hire you as much as they have to interview you. Because if you go into an organization and they don't buy into your philosophy and they don't buy into how you suggest that they handle things, there could be a conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is why I say that at the level that your listeners are at, to be truly authentic and clear in the resume about who you are and what you want and what you've accomplished, it's such a perfect place, because then you start to repel the organizations that you actually don't want to work for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. But what happens if you go in and, the leaders say, I'm unhappy, Mary, I don't like the way my managers manage, I don't like the way this is going, and you tell them your philosophy. I assume, they interview you and you tell them your approach, and they say, well, isn't that a little bit radical?
Yeah, and the ones who want radical will hire you on the spot. And sometimes it might be a little bit of a sales game. I often get people who tell me, listen, I'm a CEO or a COO or a general manager, and I want to find an organization that's got it all put together and they have a great culture. And then I look at them and I say, then you don't want an executive role. People don't want executives who are going to come in because things are blue skies and rainbows. People want an executive who's going to come in because they need to fix something.
Right.
So if you're going to be a leader, you have to be able to go into these organizations and say, that's something worth fixing. That's a thing that I want to be able to turn around.
So how did you get involved with the Global Women's Leadership Summit?
Oh, that was a bit by chance and a bit by courage. So I came upon the Global Women's Leadership Summit through just online marketing, and I saw it and I signed up for it. And Grant Wapi, who's the founder of it, sent an email out after the first summit and invited people to contact him if they were interested in summits and just having a conversation, things like that. And so unlike most people, I replied and say, yeah, sure, I'll have a conversation with you. And so we spoke. Grant's based in Australia. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. And so we spoke by Skype. And he became a bit of a mentor to me as I was trying to grow my coaching business. And eventually I asked him if I could promote one of my webinars to his audience. And he said, I have a better idea. What if you help me with the summit?
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so we partnered and we ran the 2015 summit together, and then the 2016 summit together, and then we have the next one, of course, coming up, which you're going to be a part of again this October, and we're looking forward to having a great lineup this year. We have over 40 speakers lined up to speak online live with our audience.
Fantastic. Well, now, if people wanted to get a hold of you and find out what you do and so forth, Mary, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I love getting emails. So I think one of the best ways is to simply send me an email at mary@themanagementcoach.com and tell me what's going on for you and tell me what's happening in your work. And I can point you towards resources that I think will be helpful, free resources, extremely effective resources. And I think that's probably the easiest way, mary@themanagementcoach.com.
Fantastic. So if you want to know about what Mary does, or if you want to bring her into your organization, or if you want to find out more about the Global Women's Summit, or if you want to just understand all of this information about leadership and managing, which is so imperative for whatever you're doing, remember, it's Mary at themanagementcoach.com. Now, we have just about a minute and a half left, Mary. What would you like to tell our audience that we have not yet spoken about?
I think that one of the things I would like to leave everyone with is this idea that effective management takes discipline, it takes effort, and it isn't mystical. There isn't some sort of magic pill you can take. It is methodical. There are very specific practices that you can undertake to be a really effective manager who can retain their work and be amongst the elite 20% that are driving the results of every organization. And as Peter Drucker would say, effectiveness is a discipline, and like every discipline, it can be learned. And so I would encourage everybody who's feeling sort of at the end of their rope or overwhelmed or stressed to just reach out with me. I will show you the steps. I will give you that relief that you're looking for from the pressures of management, and we can have a lot of fun together. So that's what I would leave people with.
That sounds wonderful. It really does. So you heard it here. If you want to get in touch with Mary, it's Mary at themanagementcoach.com. Very easy and something that's easy to remember. Thanks so much for being with us, Mary. It was a delight. And I know our listeners really learned a lot today, as did I. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Gayle.